I'm going to share a little bit about myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Mara Walsh, and I am in the United States, specifically in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is between Philadelphia and New York. Don't let the name Girl Travel Tours fool you. We welcome everyone in our tours, whether they're virtual or real life tours. I started leading physical tours with EF Tours as a Girl Scout leader, and that is where the name came from. But now I lead tours for all ages using EF Go Ahead Tours, EF Tours, and many other tour operators. But since we are unable to travel physically, or at least most of us are, that led me to the virtual tours. There's a couple reasons why I started this virtual tour series. One, I really wanted to support the tour director community during this time of travel restrictions where they have not been able to work. And I really wanted to keep the excitement of travel alive for my travel group, and since extend that opportunity to those of you who have learned about us through your friends, your family, on social media or other means. We've done more than 50 tours since COVID has struck. If you'd like to access any of the recordings, they are available on my website, Girl Travel Tours. There's a virtual tour drop-down menu, which you can access them from. They are also available on my Facebook page and YouTube channel. We have several more tours planned in the coming months, and we will continue to schedule more as we go into the new year. Right now, we have coming up this year, Mystery in Transylvania, Northern Spain, and Victoria Falls. I'll be taking a little break for the next 3 weeks as I will be on an actual tour in Kenya. So keep an eye out for the Facebook live streaming. We will try to stream live from our tour to our Girl Travel Tours page and our group. This is our first group tour since 2019. So we are so very excited to get back out there. And check back after this month as we will add new destinations for our virtual tour presentations. As long as you're interested in these virtual tour presentations, we will continue to produce them. I know many of you found our virtual tour events through Facebook, and some of you are on Facebook right now streaming this event live. So I just wanted to, again, put out a warning out there for anybody who is paying to access the link of these. You should not be paying to access this tour. They are free to attend. If you choose to tip the tour guide or the tour director later on in the tour or afterwards, that is up to you, and it's completely optional and not mandatory. So if you were caught in the scam and you did give money to access this tour, you'll want to contact your bank or Facebook or whoever took the money and make sure you report those people who are providing that information. To safely access my events, you can always go to my website, which is girltraveltours.com, and my Facebook page. If by clicking on a link, you're asked to give money, you know you are not on my page. So please just be careful out there. And I want to review a few ways that you're going to interact with us tonight. As I said, if you have questions for the tour guide or the tour director, you can ask them through the Q&A link, and we will address those questions after the virtual tour presentation. If you want to chat it up with me during the tour, please, by all means, do that through the chat, and I will try to answer your questions or respond to them as we go along. If you're on Facebook, feel free to post all you want. Everybody will interact with one another on Facebook, and that's a great way to be interactive during the presentation. And as always, I want to throw up a poll, which will give us an understanding of what your connection is with Milan, which is our city that we're going to tour tonight. Your choices are: I have been there and love it, I have a trip booked, I plan to go in the future, I have no set plans, but I'm interested in the location, or I am solely interested in experiencing it virtually. And I will tell you, I have been to Milan, but I know nothing about Milan because I was not there with a guide. I was there on my own. So I am looking forward to tonight's presentation, which will shed a light on what Milan really is and what its history is. So if you are like me and you need to know more information about Milan, or you're just here to revisit and rekindle your your love affair with the city, please welcome back. It looks like we have about 44% of people who have no set plans to visit, but they're interested in the location. I'm sharing the results so that you can see this. We have about 20% that have been in love it, which is great. And then of course we have our virtual travelers that are here strictly for the virtual experience. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. If you still see it up on your screen, you just have to click on the little red button at the top left to get the poll off your screen. Okay, so today's virtual tour presentation is scheduled for 90 minutes plus the Q&A. So I hope you're ready with a snack or a drink in hand and you're ready for a great presentation. And as we know, a tour would not be complete without a fantastic tour director. A tour director is like a personal concierge, and they are by far the most important people in a travel group. And I will share with you via chat and the Q&A how you can tip the tour director. If you appreciate this presentation and our guide, please leave a tip using the means that we will share in the chat. All of the tips go directly to the tour director once collected, minus the Zoom operating expenses. So today we are lucky to have back with us Elena, who has been with us several times before and has done several virtual tours with us, including Rome, Florence, the Amalfi Coast, the Vatican City, Greece, Paris, and I'm sure I may be missing a few others, but you can certainly see her recorded tours on our website. We're so excited to have her back with us today to share her hometown of Milan with us. So Elena, if you are ready, you can join me now and I will hand over the presentation and the event and you can go and take it and share your screen.
Thank you, Mara. Thank you very much and welcome everyone on my behalf as well to tonight's virtual event. I'm very, very happy to be here again. The summer was a little bit of a pause for me. So I'm also very, very happy to be bringing you, albeit only virtually, to Milan. Milan is my birth city, and it hasn't been up to maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It was never included in the touristic routes. So I haven't seen a lot of tourism growing up in Milan. And this is also the reason why I moved to Rome when I started being a local guide, because of course we have a lot more of you coming to visit cities such as Florence and Venice and Rome. But Milan has grown a lot in the past decade. It has become a beautiful city. And so I am very hopeful that after COVID, it's going to become one of the most visited cities. Let's say we always have a big competition with Rome going. I'm going to share my screen. Mara, is that okay with you? I see yours is still on. I'm going to share.
Good to go. Okay. Take it over.
So that I can share with you the slides that I have put together for tonight. Oh, the toolbar is always in the middle. There you go. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. For the ones of you who've already attended the events that I led together with Mara, you might remember that I usually like to give titles to my presentations, and tonight I just couldn't. I thought about it for long, and nothing seemed, I don't know if good enough or funny enough or fitting enough. So I just called it Milano. So let's go. Milano, by the way, is the Italian name of the city of Milan. So just to clarify, because sometimes it's a little bit difficult to realize that it's the same places. You guys, you Anglophones, you change the names, but Milano is Milan.
Elena, before you get going, if there's a way, we can see your toolbar. So if there's a way to push it all the way down to the bottom, just so it's out of the view of the slides.
It's still there, isn't it?
It is. It's strange.
Let me see. What about now?
Yes, better.
Yeah.
There's a little bar in the middle, but I think it's going to, yeah, it went away.
It's gone, isn't it? Okay, perfect. Yep. Perfect. Okay, thank you, Mara. So, as always, I'd like to show you on the map of the world where the place that we are going to talk about is, and especially as opposed to where you are, so as to give you some reference. So I use latitude to do so. With Milan, we are on the 45th parallel, of course, in the northern hemisphere. That is the line that I marked on the map. And Milan is right there in the north of Italy. Now, from Milan, if we travel eastward on the same parallel, at the same latitude, we would find just a few examples, but the city of Ploiești, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly, in modern time Romania, and further east at the very end of the Asian continent, the parallel runs through the province of Shukbatar in Mongolia. Whereas from Milan moving westward in Northern America, the parallel runs through Deer Island in Canada. I saw we have a lot of Canadian friends joining tonight. And on the west coast, it runs in the United States, this time just north of the city of Salem, Oregon. So these are your geographical references. Within the Italian peninsula, Milan is the capital city of one of our regions. Italy is divided into 20 regions. It is an administrative division. The region is up there in the north. It's called Lombardy. So Milan is the capital city of Lombardy. And as you can see, Lombardy, of course, borders with other Italian regions, but to the north, across the Alps, we have Switzerland. So lots of people from Milan work in Switzerland, in the Italian part of Switzerland, and commute every day. It is very, very close. I'm showing you this image, and there's Milan, to show you that the city stands on this vast plain. This triangular green space that you see is a very flat plain that, of course, was created many, many moons ago, millions of years ago, by this river. This river is the most important river that we have in Italy, the longest. It is called Po, simply Po, P-O. And the plain was created, and I'm hoping this next image is going to make it even more clear. Of course, we have the Alps to the north, yeah, they crown the Italian peninsula, and they make the geographical natural border between us and our neighbors to the north. And then we have this other mountain range that you see that runs vertically through the peninsula, a little bit like a spine. And those are the Apennines Mountains, way older than the Alps in geological terms, of course. And that's why they don't have the harsh peaks that you are used to associating with the Alps, because the elements had more time to shape them and mold them. In the middle between these two mountain ranges in the north of the peninsula, of the Italian peninsula, is this very flat, you can see it very well in the satellite image, very flat plain. And I'm telling you all this because it has to do with a lot of aspects of how life in Milan is nowadays. So this is gonna make a lot of sense while we move through the presentation. So this was to give you an idea of where Milan is. This gentleman is who we have to thank for the existence of the city of Milan. His name was Belloveso. He was a Celt, he was a prince, he came from Gaul, which is nowadays France, more or less, so northwest of the Alps. At some point during his life, Belloveso decided that he would lead his people in search of a new land where to settle down. Their population was growing, and the place where they were living was not enough anymore for all the population. So he started leading his people, and he crossed the Alps. He came towards the south, and he found himself in the middle of that plain that we were looking at on the satellite image, and he decided to stop here. This, of course, is a random image of a clearing nowadays somewhere in Russia, by the way, but he found a clearing looking exactly as this one in the image, a natural circular opening in the forest that he was used to, because for the Celts, these types of open spaces within forests were considered sacred spaces. They thought these places were the imprint on the surface of the earth of certain astronomical coordinates. And so they used them with their druids, led by the druids, for their religious rituals. They called these places, these openings in the forests, Medelan. This is the place where Belloveso decides to settle down around in the area around the open Milan. And this happened in the 6th century before the Common Era, so between 500 and 600 years before the year 0. And then came the Romans. The Romans came everywhere, especially on the European continent. So at some point in history, you will have a Roman city wherever you go. The Romans, of course, grew the settlement into a proper city. It was a very important city for the Romans. They didn't call it Milan anymore. Of course, they were using Latin and not the Celt language anymore. So from Milan, they changed it to Mediolanum, which you can already tell for yourselves. We still retain a memory of this Roman Latin name in the actual name of the city of Milan. This happened 300 years before the year 0. Milan grew as a city. It grew in importance. You can understand how where it is placed geographically makes it a very important hub, both for commerce, for transportation of goods. It was placed perfectly for the exchange of goods between the northern parts of Europe and the southern parts of the Italian peninsula. So the main thoroughfares in and out of Italy passed through here. But it was also important from the military point of view, for the moving of the troops from the south to the north as soon as the Romans were ready to start conquering the rest of the European continent once they had a strong foot into the whole Italian peninsula. Milan became so important that when the Roman Empire was split into two halves, an eastern and western, and we're talking about 300 years after Christ, Milan became the capital city of the western side of the empire. This is when there are two emperors, one ruling over the west, one ruling over the east. The eastern capital is Constantinople, nowadays Istanbul. The western is changed. It's not in Rome anymore. Rome is now too far away from the northern borders. The barbaric tribes and people are pressing from the north because they want in. Life within the empire is way better than outside of its borders. So to control the borders, to be ready for any intervention, any defense that would be needed at the border, the capital needs to be closer, needs to be moved up north. And Milan is the perfect city. We have very little remaining in the city nowadays from Roman times because the city changed a lot and was destroyed and rebuilt plenty times throughout the following centuries. We have some stretches of the walls, the defensive walls the Romans built around the city, and some of the watchtowers that were built along this defensive line of walls, but very, very few things. We know that because Milan was the seat of the emperor, once the court moved to Milan from Rome, we know it was an incredibly beautified city with lots of monuments, including its own built amphitheater. Amphitheater is a generic word for this type of venue. The most famous amphitheater of all, of course, is the Colosseum in Rome. But every important Roman city had its own amphitheater, which is why we can still visit Roman amphitheaters in the south of France, for instance, or in other cities in Milan, in Italy. In Milan, we don't have it anymore. This is a possible reconstruction of what it must have looked like. But very, very recently, archaeologists have found the foundations of this architecture underground. This is very much downtown nowadays. And there is a project, an ongoing project that will probably be inaugurated next year, so it's imminent, of rebuilding the ancient Roman amphitheater, but in greenery. So the pieces, the parts of the foundation of the original construction will be left in the open so that we can see them, and the shape and the rest of the ancient Roman architecture is going to be rebuilt using only shrubs and plants and trees. And this is going to make up for a huge park right in the center of Milan. The most famous monument, probably the most important also, that remains from those times, we are talking about the 4th century after Christ, at the end of the 300s, is this complex. This is a basilica, a church, but also a convent that is dedicated that was built by and dedicated to our patron saint, Saint Ambrose. Saint Ambrose was the Bishop of Milan at the end of the 300s. He built several basilicas, this being the most important one of all. It is very difficult to take it all in a picture because, as you can see, the facade, the front of the church is partly covered by this porticoed courtyard that welcomes you when you go visit. This was the typical shape of the very first early Christian churches once they were allowed to build their places of worship. It is beautifully lit up at night. So maybe my first suggestion, if you plan on coming to Milan, would be to come and take a stroll also at nighttime. You cannot access the church, but you can enjoy it and walk all around it, all lit up. If any of you is from California, from LA, or if any of you, I know this sounds weird, it sounds random, me mentioning LA suddenly, but it's gonna make sense in a second. If any of you studied at UCLA, this building might look very familiar. In fact, a couple of the buildings making up UCLA's main campus were designed taking inspiration from St. Ambrose Basilica in Milan. The two architects who designed these buildings were fascinated by the early Middle Ages architecture that they saw in Milan, and they decided to replicate it. This is the facade of Royce Hall, and right opposite the library that also has a design that reminds us of the church that you can find in Milan. So if you've studied at UCLA, you might want to visit Milan also because of this little curiosity. Now, if this outline that you see in red in the image now was the perimeter of the Roman city, that ring of defensive walls that the Romans had built to contain their city, in the Middle Ages, Milan grew, and a new ring of walls, of course, was added to contain the new neighborhoods that had grown beyond the limits of the Roman city. Of those times, we have something remaining in the city nowadays. You know, the Middle Ages were a super long period. It's a very, very long age in history. So we're talking about centuries and centuries. Some of these things come from very different moments, still considered the Middle Ages. This that you see in the image now is sometimes when you walk downtown, you will see a wall with these openings, with these arches. And this is parts of the defensive wall that was built in the Middle Ages. And the arches, of course, would have been at the time the gates in and out of the city. Of course, after the Middle Ages, the city kept growing and it went beyond the system of walls that they had built at those times. So parts of it now are downtown. This is still considered downtown now in Milan. Probably the most important, grand, famous landmark from those times, and we are now traveling through the centuries very quickly. This was built at the very end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance times, is the castle. We have a castle in Milan right downtown. We call it the Sforza Castle. Now, I am sure you are familiar with the name of the ruling family in Florence during the Renaissance times, the Medici. Now, the Sforza in Milan are the same thing. They were the ruling family. They were the dukes of Milan. They were the ones responsible for building this fortress. This is also a fantastic place to stroll at night. You are very, very, very centrally located, even more than with the Basilica before. This beautiful fountain in front of it gets illuminated together with the monument. So it is very spectacular to come here also at night. If you visit during the day, you can enter, of course, the castle. It is visitable. It is nowadays a civic monument, so the city owns it. You have this first huge courtyard that welcomes you when you enter. And you have a couple smaller, more intimate courtyards that are built behind the bigger one in the part of the castle that originally would house the family of the Duke. So the residential quarters of the ruling family were decorated with a couple of these courtyards. This family is responsible for calling upon Leonardo da Vinci to come live in Milan and work for them. So in the castle, one of the things that you can visit is a room that was entirely decorated on its walls by Leonardo, including the ceiling. But the castle nowadays houses 18 between museums, civic collections, research centers. So it is a wealth of places that you can, different places and collections that you can visit. One for all, because I couldn't not mention it, the museum that houses this statue. This is the very last sculpture that Michelangelo worked on. It is a Pietà. It is housed in this new beautiful setting. They built the lighting and the flooring and everything in this fantastic room, all just for the statue. It is a very moving piece. You can see it is unfinished. Michelangelo worked on the statue until the very end, until the night before he passed away. So that is one of the reasons why he left it unfinished. He was doing it for himself. It wasn't a public commission. It hadn't been asked by anyone else. He was doing it for himself. So it is a very intimate, very moving composition. It is lovely to just stand in front of it and dwell in front of it and just take it all in. Now, behind the castle, had we been there in person, we would find this huge park. This is a beautiful park with ponds, with bridges. It's lovely to just stroll in the park. It is a huge green lung at the very core of the city. In this way, it reminds me a little bit of Central Park in New York City, even though we are talking about a way smaller park. Milan is a very small city. It's definitely densely populated, but very, very contained in its borders. So the park reflects, it is proportioned with the dimensions of the city. In this beautiful photo, aerial photo, you can see the castle, which is that quadrangular red bricks building at the very middle of the picture. And you can see the division between the first part, the very big rectangular courtyard, and the back with the buildings where the family of the Duke resided. At its back, so upper in the picture, to the right, you see the park. Whereas opposite, in front of the castle and all around it, you see this ring of buildings that were added. Nowadays, they are mostly diplomatic residences or embassies. Some of them are residential. You can imagine how much it must cost to rent or buy a home here. This ring of buildings was added way later than the castle. It wasn't part of the original project. This was done when Napoleon conquered Italy and was ruling here and made Milan his seat in Italy. It made Milan the capital of his Italian reign. And he, of course, tackled a lot of projects for remodeling and beautifying the cities that he had conquered, including Milan. Now, the other landmark, the other place that you cannot avoid, that you cannot miss out on if you visit Milan, that was built at the same time, is this lovely church. This is a complex. It also has a Dominican monastery that was added by UNESCO in their list of World Heritage Sites, the sites that they oversee, very early in the 1980s, early in the history of UNESCO. And not only because it is a lovely place to visit, it is wealthily decorated on every inch of its inner surfaces. It has courtyards of its own with these beautiful magnolias. If you come early in the spring and you see them in bloom, they are lovely. But mainly, UNESCO decided this because this complex houses Leonardo's Last Supper. Now, Leonardo's Last Supper was painted. It was asked for, not by the Duke this time, but by the Dominican friars of the convent of this complex. They asked that Leonardo decorated with a painting one of the walls of their refectory where they had their meals. And so the theme of the Last Supper came naturally. This is not detachable in any way. You understand that this was painted on the plaster of the wall of the refectory, so it is now part of the wall. There are very strict rules to visit because it is a very fragile work. It needs to be defended also from us. So humidity, light, temperature need to always be under control. So you need to book ahead. All of this to tell you that if you want to visit, if you want to be in front of the Last Supper, you need to be in time, book ahead, make sure you get your ticket. They're timed, you need to be on time, and so on. Across the street from the church that we were just looking at, where the Last Supper by Leonardo is this building. Now, this is a very unique building in the sense that it's been here since the middle of the 1400s. This was here when Leonardo was painting the Last Supper. It is nowadays a museum. It is privately owned, but it is a museum that is open to the public, so one can visit. It is called the Atellani House. Atellani is the name of the family to whom this residence was gifted by the Duke of Milan. So they lived in this place. Again, you can visit it, and it is a great occasion to visit a 1400s residence. Not often we get to see these places unchanged, almost untouched. The peculiar thing about this place is that at its back, it has a beautiful garden, very much cared for. And in this garden, there was a project recently by one of the universities in Milan they found in the garden some of the roots of a vineyard that Leonardo had implanted here. And they realized that some biological material was still alive. So they studied it, of course. They did a lot of genetic tests and trials, and they were able to revive the vineyard. So this is called Leonardo's vineyard, because it is his vineyard that was revived only a couple of years ago. In 2018, it was the first time that they were able to actually harvest the vineyard and produce wine. So the bottle that you see in the picture is a limited edition bottle. This is specifically the one that you see in the picture. If you see the label, is one over 330. So they made 330 first limited edition bottles, the very first one of which they will never sell. It is on display in a glass case in the house, in the museum that you can visit. But the wine that they produce with these grapes can be purchased in the museum if you go and visit. It has a normal shaped bottle, but a lovely label with, they decided that on the label they would put one of Leonardo's works. So the lady with the ermine is the label of this very particular, unique, I would say, wine. Now, at the time of Leonardo, I'm showing you a map of Milan with highlighted what was the trademark of Milan for so many centuries: water. Milan was like a Venice. Even though we are far away from the sea, Milan is in a region that is totally landlocked. You saw how close to the Alps we are. No sea close to Milan, but in that plain, in that flat plain between the Alps and the other mountain range, lots of rivers run. And we have also the lakes. I'm sure you know of Lake Como to the north of Milan, but there are another couple of important lakes in the north of Italy. So all the system of waters was channeled in the city of Milan in a system that was called Navigli. So Navigli are canals that were used mainly for commercial purposes. Milan had a couple of ports. It had a couple of artificial lakes where the goods could be unloaded, construction materials, produce from the countryside, all that you can think of that the city needed would be brought into the city by water. Leonardo contributed to the system of the canals by refurbishing them, let's say, and also designing a couple of the projects that would have added some features to make the system more efficient. Now, the map that I showed you before with all the blue lines of all the canals that were in Milan during the Renaissance times, we don't have that many canals anymore. A lot of them in the 1930s were covered to make room for roads for cars. So when the automobiles became, a popular thing and everybody had one, they decided that it would be more economically efficient to pave roads over the canals, but parts of them remain. And nowadays, you can take a boat tour along the Navigli canals. And I think it's a great way to see the city from a different perspective, to see corners of the city that are very picturesque and unique, but that you would otherwise miss out on. And also maybe you can choose where to have a drink or dinner, because the Navigli, the area where the Navigli are, is nowadays the nightlife scene of Milan. So especially in the summer, you've got a couple of bars and restaurants on boats that remind us a little bit of the canals in Northern Europe, for instance, in Amsterdam. And then you see the streets at the sides of the canals are pedestrian, so you can walk onto them, no cars passing. And all the restaurants and the cafes and the pubs, they place their tables outside with all the lights decorated. It's beautiful. So this is definitely a place where to be at night, at least. There is an ongoing project. Milan is a very fervid city nowadays, filled with new projects. There is a project by one of our universities. They are designing a way of reopening the canals. So this might be something that will happen in the very near future. They are debating it in these days with our mayor and with the local authorities. They would like to reopen our waterways. Now, this is a rendering in the image. It's only a drawing of what it might look like if they reopen the canals. I think they've been a bit optimistic with how the water is clear, with how clean the water looks like. But still, it might be, a good thing to bring back the image, the look that Milan had for so many centuries, and then, of course, shaped this history of the city, as these things always do. Now, this is the shape of Milan today. I debated whether to show you a satellite image or a map such as this one, and the satellite image is very much intricate and impossible to really understand. You can't tell where the city ends, where the countryside begins. It's not, the borders are not marked in a very specific way. So this is way more clear. Milan is divided into 9 districts. It's an administrative division, of course. Each district comprises more neighborhoods. The central district, number 1, is where we're going next. At the very center of the central district, we find this square. This square is the central point in the city. So it really marks the dead center of the city. And if you look at the greenery in the middle of the square and how they decided to shape it in this circular shape, you might be reminded of what we were looking at before when we were talking about the Celt prince Belloveso and the circular opening in the forest called Medelan. That is the namesake for our city and where everything began. Well, we're looking at it. This square was opened and it is built exactly in the spot where that opening in the forest was found by Belloveso 600 years before Christ. Milan has grown, of course, since that first Celtic settlement, but it has always maintained the same point at its center. So this is still the very center of town, even after so many years, 2,600 years afterwards. The main building overlooking this lovely square is this, della Scala. Now, La Scala is a theater, and it's a little simple when looked from the outside during the day, but because it is a theater, I want to show it to you lit up at night. La Scala is one of the most famous and important opera and ballet theaters in the world. Again, it was built at the end of the 1700s, at a time when lines in architectures needed to be very clean. You see how polished, how simple, how subdued it is, neoclassical style. But when they light it up, it has its charm. You can visit the theater even during the day. There is a museum dedicated to the history of the opera, and specifically the opera within this theater. So the most famous singers, the most famous directors, the most famous composers. You can walk through the theater and its different halls. Of course, it is gorgeous inside. You can also enter the space where the audience usually sits. You can look at the stage from one of the seats in one of the different tiers. If you are lucky enough, or maybe if you plan ahead enough, you want to be at the La Scala Theater on its opening night, on the opening of the opera season. This happens every year on the 7th of December. The 7th of December is the day when Milan celebrates its patron saint, Saint Ambrose, that we were mentioning before. So the grand opening of the opera season always falls on the 7th of December. All the VIPs are here. Our president is here, our mayor, all the local authorities, several VIPs. And of course, it is a grand social event. It is the event of the season, basically. If you can get tickets, if you're willing to pay enough, you are going to be part of the event of the season in Milan. The real reason why everybody goes is to look and judge the clothes, the gowns that the ladies chose to wear, you know, at the opening of the La Scala Theater. This is a sport in Milan. We're really good at it. Now, leaving the theater, we step back into the square in front of it, and we move towards the corner of the square where you see this archway, this arch opening that opens onto a gallery. So we start walking into the gallery, looking back beyond the opening that we just came through. We glimpse the square, the greenery in the middle, and the statue that is representing Leonardo da Vinci as a homage by the city, from the city to one of the main artists who lived and worked in Milan. Walking further into the gallery, we find ourselves here. This gallery is nicknamed, since the moment when it was built and opened, the drawing room of Milan, Milan's living room. It is one of the first and oldest, still active today, shopping galleries in the world. It was built at the end of in the second half of the 1800s, when Milan became a kingdom, a unified modern nation with a king at its head. It is in fact dedicated to our first king. So this is the gallery Victor Emanuele II, Victor Emmanuel II. It is a shopping gallery, so let's shop a bit. In this gallery, you find some of the oldest and most historical shops in Milan. One for all, Prada. Prada is probably one of the most famous and successful Italian luxury brands, luxury fashion brands in the world. It was established in 1913 in Milan by its founder, Mario Prada, who opened up this shop. This is the first shop ever that Prada opened. Very ironically, and this is just a side note, but I found it very funny when I learned this history behind the brand. Mario Prada, the founder of the brand, was a misogynist who didn't want the women of the family to work in the business, in running the family business. But, and this is the irony, his only son couldn't care less about taking over once his father wanted to retire. And it was his daughter who actually took over and held the reign of the company for 40 some years. And after her came his niece. So you see how sometimes things go their own way. Another historical, way more historical shop that you can visit when walking through the gallery is this bookstore, Libreria, bookstore, Bocca. Libreria Bocca was established in 1775. So this is one of the oldest running shops in Milan, in the whole city. The gallery was not opened in 1775. It didn't exist yet. It was opened in 1867, and this is when the bookstore moved to its current location within the shops of the gallery. If you shop in the gallery, you can get yourself a Borsalino Humphrey Bogart style hat in the Borsalino boutique that was established in 1883. You can get some lovely pastries in the Biffi shop. This is another one of the original shops opened together with the gallery when the gallery was built in 1867. As you can see, the Biffi pastry shops occupies a whole block, let's say, of the intersection of the gallery. Biffi is a very, very famous brand of pastries and confections in Italy, a very old one. And at the time when they opened this specific location in 1867, they were the official pastry makers for our royal house. So they, they have a lineage. You can also do something very, very typical in Milan. You can have an aperitivo. An aperitivo is a drink, usually a cocktail that has some alcohol in it, but you can also have it non-alcoholic, that we like to drink eating something very savory like peanuts, like chips, before a main meal. So either before lunch or before dinner, our dolce vita, it's just like that. We do it even before lunch. Life is too short. Now, this is an invention of the Milanese. So the aperitivo, the drinking a cocktail with eating something before dinner or before lunch, was invented in Milan. You have a lot of places, of course, and lots of historical places that have been serving aperitivos for decades. This is just one example, one that you have within the gallery, established in 1915, Camparino. Maybe you know the liquor Campari. So this is what they serve at this bar. And of course, you have an aperitivo in style. You can see, by the way, the bartenders are dressed up. That is a very, elegant place. But I wanted to take you here. I'm imagining we're spending a whole day together in Milan, morning to night, and we are at lunchtime. So we really want to eat something more than just peanuts and chips with an aperitivo. I'm taking you to Luini. Luini is just outside the gallery, so we are still in the same place. Luini is where the Milanese go for lunch, for their lunch break during the weekdays when they are out working. And Luini serves the street food in Milan. Every Milanese has gone at least once, even if you don't work downtown, even if you're not usually in this area, they come here, they get one of these things. Luini serves these. These are called the Panzerotti. Now, Panzerotti are very, very easily little hot pockets. Yeah, they get deep fried though. They come from the south of Italy. They were not originated here in the north, because the family Luini, who opened up this shop in 1959, came from the region Puglia, the heel of the Italian peninsula. They came to Milan, they imported the Panzerotti, the little hot pockets, and they were an immediate success. And to this day, since 1959, they serve them scaldingly hot. You burn your tongue every time. Listen, there is no way of eating a panzerotto with dignity and elegance. It is gooey inside. It is filled with, there are many versions. The typical classical panzerotto will have mozzarella cheese and tomato sauce. It's like a little deep fried pizza. I mean, what's not to love, right? But you will get what you see in the picture. The cheese goes everywhere, the sauce goes everywhere, you burn your, but it is an experience that is totally worth it, believe me. So jot it down, Luini, if you're ever in Milan. While we are chewing on our panzerotto, because it is there's no tables in Luini. You take it, you grab it, you take it away, and you eat it while you walk. So we can give a last look at the beautiful grand ceiling, iron and glass. This gallery that was opened in 1867. This is the time very shortly after the Eiffel Tower was born and built. So it is a time when iron and glass become very much loved for grand and monumental architectures. So it is in the style of the period. And when we exit the gallery, we turn back to look at its grand triumphal arch that marks its main entrance. Now, by exiting the gallery, we find ourselves in another square, way larger than the one we left where the theater was when we entered the gallery. And if we turn aside from the gallery entrance, we find ourselves in front of this. Now, this is the cathedral of the city of Milan, or simply the Duomo. Duomo means cathedral in Italian, but in Italy, when we say Duomo, for some reason, we mean the Duomo of Milan. It is the Duomo for antonomasia. It is the centerpiece of the city. It is the symbol of the city of Milan, and it is at its very core, even geographically speaking. You want to go in. I know when you come to Italy, you are churched out after a couple of days because there's more churches than people, let's face it. And so you keep getting into churches and seeing church after church after church. But believe me, this is grand. This is an incredible cathedral, one of the biggest churches in the world. It is built in this beautiful Gothic style. It is a forest of columns when you enter. I don't know if you can see the people in the very middle of the nave, so you can maybe tell in proportion the grandness of this building. It is lavishly decorated in the Gothic style with these beautiful inlaid floors. So it's really a place where you want to take your time. You want to sit in one of the benches and just, it's usually very quiet because of how tall it is. Sound gets lost in its height, and it's a very quiet place. So you just get there and you look around and you notice 1,000 details. You can also ascend the dome. You see how grand this is, placed right there in the middle of town. You can ascend the Duomo. You can ascend what they call the terraces of the Duomo. Now, what I'm showing you here is the actual roof of the cathedral. You can step onto it, but there's terraces because there's different openings at different levels, and you can get all the way to the top. And while you climb the steps to get to the top, you can admire from up close, the beautiful marble that was used to build this church. It comes from the region of the lakes north of Milan, and it is it's not one single hue. It is white, but also pinkish and gray, and it changes its color depending on the time of the day and how the sunlight hits it. You can look up close at the details of the masonry and of the decoration in the stone. You can have fun, looking at all the different gargoyles and all the different statues. This is an overly decorated church, even on the outside. The total number of statues on the Duomo of Milan is 3,400, so 3,400 statues, some of which are definitely magnificent to behold. From the top of the Duomo, you have a fantastic 360 degrees view overlooking the whole of the city. This new skyline, this is the new administrative district that was completed just a few years ago with all its skyscrapers. And if you go up the Duomo on a very clear day, but it has to be a very clear day, you get rewarded with this view. So the Alps are not too far away. We tend to forget, even us living in Milan, we tend to forget because it is not usually this clear and we can't always see them, but they are there very, very close to us. And so from the top of the Duomo, you might get this view overlooking also the snow-capped Alps. Overlooking all of this, presiding over the whole construction and the whole city is she. Now, she is the Virgin Mary. This is a statue that sits atop the tallest and most central spire of the Duomo, at a height of 360 feet. For a while, when it was placed on top of the church at the end of the 1700s, for decades, there was a written law that prohibited anyone from building any higher than this Virgin Madonna, than this Virgin Mary. It had to be the tallest point in the city. Nowadays, with the skyscrapers, we kind of bent the rules. But every time they build a construction and architecture that is taller than the cathedral, they place a copy of this statue of the Virgin Mary on top of the new architecture of the new building, of the new skyscraper. So that's, we're Italians, we're really good at going around the rules and finding a way. Now, this statue is 13 and a half feet tall. She's made of gilded bronze. She weighs 3,000 pounds. We call her the Tiny Madonna. Why? Because usually when we look at her from down below, she looks like this. She looks like a tiny, tiny Madonna. She is the symbol, she is really the symbol of Milan, even more than the whole cathedral itself. The expression in the shadow of the tiny Madonna means the city of Milan. So when you hear someone say that, they are talking about the city of Milan. She was safeguarded during World War II. They were afraid that she would become, like a beam of light in the night for the bombers of the Allies who bombed Milan very heavily at the end of the war. And so she was wrapped in gray and green rags for the whole duration of the war, for the whole 5 years of the war. So the unwrapping of the Virgin Mary and the placement of the Italian flag in one of her hands marked for the Milanese the liberation from the fascists and the end of the war and the end of World War II. So I'm getting chills, just by recounting this. It must have been an incredibly emotional moment for the Milanese when they finally saw their tiny Madonna shining again atop their Duomo. The stained glass windows, there is one more chapter regarding the Duomo. The stained glass window are something, they are incredible. And miraculously enough, some of these stained glass windows are still the original ones that were done in the 1400s. And it is a miracle, especially after what I told you about the bombs that were that hit Milan copiously during World War II. They are lovely also to look at from the outside. So when nighttime comes and the inside of the church is lit up, this is a picture taken from behind the Duomo. So right behind the apse of the Duomo, you can see the beautiful colors of the stained glass windows, even from the outside. And also, apparently, allegedly, they are responsible for the most iconic dish of the Milanese cuisine, risotto with saffron, or Milanese risotto. How come? What do the stained glass windows of the cathedral have to do with a rice dish? It follows. This is a legend, probably, but it is the story that we tell ourselves for explaining why we put saffron in risotto. Apparently, in the 1400s, there was one of the workers that was responsible for, one of the people responsible for making the stained glass windows, who added saffron to every one of his pigments and colors to make them, more vibrant, more brilliant, and even incandescent almost they look. And he was very much made fun of by his co-workers and his boss alike because of putting saffron everywhere. He was even nicknamed Saffron. He took it badly and he wanted his own revenge. He waited for his moment, and his moment came when the daughter of his boss was getting married. And of course, they had organized a huge banquet to celebrate the event. And the Saffron, the guy, decided to secretly put some saffron in the risotto that they would serve to the wedding guests, again, as a revenge. So he thought of it as a bad gesture. But once the rice came to the table, with this beautiful golden hue. It was an immediate success, and it was also good to eat, other than just beautiful to look at. They took its golden hue as a sign, of good fortune. The news traveled fast throughout the city. The Duke heard of it, and during his parties, he started serving the Milanese risotto, the risotto with saffron. Until that moment, risotto was already a dish that the Milanese were enjoying, but only with butter and grated cheese. So it would have been white. From this moment onwards, risotto with saffron becomes Milanese risotto. Now, one little side note about this. I was a chef in another life, before, working in tourism. So I feel strongly about food. I know that in Northern America, at least in the US, I've seen risotto listed, on restaurant menus, listed as a side dish. Please do it for me. Risotto is not a side dish. Risotto is to be regarded as a pasta dish. It is a first course for us. So it doesn't need any accompaniment. It needs to be enjoyed alone, or at most, I will concede, with ossobuco. Risotto with saffron and ossobuco is the typical and only pairing that we do in our cuisine in Milan to enjoy risotto. So risotto and ossobuco, yes. Otherwise, only risotto. Very creamy, lovely. You can taste the saffron. There's no flavors that need to be added to it. If you want to try one of the best risottos, in my opinion, the best risottos right now, currently in Milan, you go here. This place is called Ratana. It is a lovely restaurant that opened up not too long ago, run by a famous chef who does a whole menu of typical Milanese dishes. So you don't have only the risotto, but you have also the other dishes of our culinary tradition. They have a lovely setup al fresco. They have a beautiful garden because the restaurant was opened within this park. We are very much downtown here still. I'm just showing you what's more or less in that first district. Remember, the very central district in the city. So this is a huge park that was created very recently, that is part of a vision that the city nowadays has. It is called, the main project within this vision is called Forestami, which literally mean reforest me. They play on words, of course. M-I, me, is the short for Milan. It's the acronym for Milan, but it is also the myself in Italian. So reforest me, as if it was the city itself asking to be made more green. And the administration, the municipality of Milan, has many projects ongoing with one goal only: to make Milan more sustainable, more green for its citizens. The goal, they actually set a specific goal, is to plant 3 million trees within 2030. So we've got 9 years left. This project started 3 or 4 years ago. So we have 9 years left. They are making good progress, even though, of course, COVID kind of shunted a little bit the progress of the project. But it's going on, and they're making good speed. Probably the most famous project that was done within this idea of making Milan a more green city, a city that I remember while growing up was the synonym for gray and polluted and industrial in Italy. It is now one of the greenest cities in Italy. It has changed a lot in the last less than 10 years. This that you're looking at is probably, again, the most famous and important of the projects they've done so far. These 2 towers are also built within the park that I just shown you. Let's look at them together. Now, these 2 towers, they are called the vertical forest. Each tower houses 900 trees and 16,000 between other plants and shrubs. With more than 90 species of greenery and plants on the buildings, they attract new birds to the city, 20 plus species so far. Now, the plants are tethered with wire for safety to the buildings, and the fire risk is contained, is managed through regular irrigation and pruning that is done by a team of 3 gardeners more than once a year. The architect responsible for this project is now on to other similar projects in Europe, in Africa. Some of these projects will be for social housing. So the vertical forests will be at some point, hopefully, affordable for all. And he's also responsible for the project of the very first forest city in the world that he is designing, and it's going to be building in Mexico. In his words, the vertical forest is an ecosystem. It has more than 21,000 plants, which is the equivalent of 2 hectares of forest, but on a very small surface and at the center of an extremely polluted and densely populated city. Now, to meet the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement, to which Milan also adhered, all buildings will have to be carbon neutral by 2050, but emissions are currently projected to double by that date. And if our cities don't adapt, they are on course for soon being underwater, especially the ones closest to the coastline. So many countries are exploring plans for green cities. The vertical forest is now considered one of the best and most efficient ways to deal with climate change, both for its capacity to absorb CO2 and release oxygen in the air, in the atmosphere, and also for its capacity of lowering the temperature of several degrees during the hottest months of the year. So I don't know what you think about it. I think it's beautiful. There are lots of interviews that you can find online on YouTube to the tenants occupying, because these are 2 apartment residential towers. It's all private apartments. There's no offices in these towers. So there's lots of interviews to the tenants who are occupying the apartments in these towers. And they all talk especially about how living in such a green environment with all these plants and nature around them had lowered their stress levels and make for a more tranquil and serene life, at least when you're at home. So we will be seeing a lot more of these projects in our cities in the near future. If you are interested in going a little bit deeper, there is a lovely short documentary that was released in 2016, I think, about who tends to the green. It is called The Flying Gardeners. Now, these 3 gentlemen who are the ones taking care of the forest, of the vertical forest on the 2 towers, they are botanists, but they also learned to be climbers so as to be able to work in the vertical forest. So the short documentary is really lovely. You can find it online. It's housed on Vimeo, not YouTube, and it's a 8 or 9 minute. It's beautiful. It's really, really beautiful, lovely scenes of the towers and their job. And here you see the 2 towers included within the skyline of this new administrative district that we were also seeing and looking at from the top of the Duomo Cathedral before. Now, my suggestion, if you want to visit Milan, as to how to move around the city, as I told you, Milan is a very small city, so it's not difficult to move around it and to visit it. It's also very flat. If you remember, we are in the middle of that very flat plain, very flat land. So there's no up and down. The bicycle is the perfect mean of transportation. These that you see in the image, you will find them everywhere. They are publicly owned bicycles that you can rent. You find them everywhere. The racks are everywhere. You unlock them with an app. There is a subscription that can be daily or weekly or annually. And the annual one is like $35. So it's very, very cheap. You can get them and put them in park wherever you arrive, so you don't have to take them back. You see every Milanese using them. They are millions nowadays. It was a very successful project that the city started already a few years back. The other way of moving around Milan, especially the downtown, is the streetcar. The streetcar is an incredibly Milanese way of moving around. It is the typical transport, public transport for Milanese since the 1800s. Of course, originally they were horse-drawn, and then when electricity came, they became such as we see today. The Milanese streetcars are famous throughout the world. I saw before that a couple of you, at least a couple of you, are in San Francisco. So you might have seen these already, because the city of San Francisco, they started a project in the 60s and the 70s of historical streetcars for the lines serving the city of San Francisco. And they purchased a fleet of our streetcars to be imported. Now you can find them in San Francisco. They serve the extremely famous F line that connects the Castro district to all the way down to Fisherman's Wharf. So you might have seen these orange streetcars of the Muni system in San Francisco. They come from my own city, from Milan. Originally, they looked like this, and they were also painted bottle green or forest green, a very dark green, and then at some point they switched to the orange. But my last suggestion, if you do plan on coming to Milan, if you don't want to use the streetcar to move around, if you prefer walking or taking the bike or going by taxi, there is a chance for you to still experience, the streetcar, and it's a very fascinating one. They've taken one of the original, the first, the oldest streetcars, and they've revamped it a bit. They've called it Atmosfera. Atmosfera is a play on word. Atmosfera in Italian means atmosphere, but ATM, it is also the acronym for the Milanese Transport Agency. So you see how they did a little play on words. This beautiful tram, oh, I gave myself away there. This beautiful streetcar has been revamped, hollowed out, been turned into an itinerant restaurant where you can have your meal while the streetcar moves. It departs every night from the castle that we looked at before. The route goes through the whole downtown district of Milan. Here you see the Navigli, the canals. So it touches all the spots that you will have seen during the day, and you can have your meal while looking out the window at all the monuments now all lit up after dark. So I think it's a 2.5 hour ride on the streetcar. You have to book way in advance because there are only 2 streetcars doing this every night, but it is very, very much worth it. Now, I hope that I have made you want to come visit Milan and me. So if you ever do in the future, let me know. I will be happy to have a coffee with you and a chat maybe on this beautiful square downtown in Milan. Thank you so much for your attention. I will be here for questions, of course, together with Mara.
Well, I'm going to jump in there because I think the most amazing thing would be to go on the Atmosfera and eat your risotto, because I have been blessed with Elena's risotto as she was a guest in my home and cooked for us. That would be the ultimate, right? So I would love
that.
Right?
I would love that.
I think that's
when
that's awesome.
this when I am with clients throughout Italy and I give them suggestions for restaurants for lunch and dinner, I always wish I could just invite them over at my place and cook for them, but usually it's huge groups of 40 and 50 people. I wouldn't know where to put them, but I would love that.
Well, I was fortunate enough to be one of those people, so I appreciate that. Yeah, so before we go into the Q&A, I'll give Elena a little bit of breather. I have put in the chat and the Facebook post how you can tip the tour guide. So if you did enjoy our tour today, which I know you have because so many chats have come in and so many people have posted that it was absolutely amazing. So thank you, Elena, for that. I have a slide up too that now that we're trying to start to travel again physically, you can see on the right-hand side the tours that I have coming up. So if you are interested in joining me and my group on a physical tour, by all means, you can email me at marawalsh@gmail.com and I will get back to you with information on tours. And if you have your own group that you'd like me to help you orchestrate a tour for, by all means, I'd be happy to do that as well. There are lots of questions coming into the Q&A. So if you are ready, Elena, we can start from the top and see how we can navigate these.
Yes, sorry, I had to reactivate my microphone. Okay. So from the top, Ellen Polignano, you have Italian in you, don't you? Who now owns the home of the Atellani? A private family. It is privately owned. They don't live there though, of course. It's not the residence anymore. So they gave the city, the municipality, the right to open the museum and run it. Silvia Russo, have you tasted the wine from Leonardo's grapes? Not yet, Silvia, not yet. Because the very first harvest that they turned into wine was 2018. And this means they harvested in September 2018, and then, they had to macerate it and process it and wait for it to be ready and then bottle it and then it was the end of 2019 and you know what happened. And so not yet, but I will. It is a white. It's a lovely grape from the north of Italy. So I usually like that type of wine. So I'm curious to know if that's any good. Mary Labanks. How handicapped friendly is Milano if you use an electric wheelchair or scooter? Extremely friendly. It is very flat, as I said. There's lifts, elevators, escalators everywhere. Even if you want to use the subway system, it has all been done very, very thoughtfully, thinking of being friendly for any type of disability. So yeah, you can definitely, no problem. Ellen Polignano again, cost of the canal tour along the Navigli. It depends. There are a couple of companies running them, but it's not very expensive. I mean, the last time I took it was a while back, but I'm thinking maximum $20, like tops $20, but even possibly less. It's a 2.5 hour. Pat Cameron, is there a geological explanation for the circles, for the medallons? I have no idea, Pat. I'm sure there is because they are natural clearings. So they're not man-made, they're not artificial in any way, but I wouldn't know the explanation. Carol Andrews, what is the population of Milano? Okay, so this is a big debate, okay, because Milano, as I mentioned at the very beginning, is in an incredibly harsh competition with Rome. It is way smaller than Rome. Milan is 1/7 the surface of Rome, but Milan, especially if you include the metropolitan area, it has been made into a larger metropolitan area, including, the small little towns, the belt of small little towns around it. You reach 3 million people. The city proper, so only the actual Milan proper, 1.5 million people. So it's not a very big. If you think of the fact that surface-wise, it's not super big. It is very dense, very densely populated. An anonymous spectator. Hi, Elena. Hi. What was the size of the opening? What was the size of the opening where Milano started? Of the size of the Medallion? I don't think we have that information. I certainly don't know it. Not too big though. It was, again, a natural opening, a clearing in a forest. So imagine a very contained opening within a very dense forest. And they cleared parts of the forest, so the spot remained untouched. It was sacred for the Celts and they used it only for religious purposes. But around the circular opening in the forest surrounding it, they opened up and cleared the space for their first settlement. And then this settlement grew and grew. So you have to imagine a very small circular opening, not huge. I want to say not bigger than the square we were looking at, but that's my logic. I'm not sure about this information. Catherine Freiling. I hope that was right. How much does admission of La Scala opera cost? A lot. It depends, actually. If you go on the premiere, on the opening season of the opening night of the opera season, hundreds of dollars. If you go any other night, it could be at little as $50, $80, but it also depends, of course, on where you seat. You've got the main audience in the parterre, you've got the tiered seats up there that cost more. The closer you are to the stage, the more central located your seat is. So it depends, but you can find tickets for as cheap as less than $100. If you want to visit the theater during the day, so the museum and the theater, not during a show, then that's just a $20 ticket. Yves Montavon. It looks like there are multiple airports into Milan. Yes, we are graced by 2 airports, both international. The biggest one of the 2, it's not in the city of Milan. It's to the north of Milan, but it caters for the city of Milan, Malpensa Airport. The other one, it's a smaller airport, but it is international. It's just been redone. So it's very now new compared to when it was built, because this was the first ever built. And it is closer to the border of the city. And there is now a subway line that they are completing that will connect the Duomo, so the very center of town and the west, to where the airport is to the east. This other airport is called Linate. So if you are connecting from another European city, or if you are already in Italy and you want to come to Milan, you really want to look for Linate. Sometimes it's way cheaper to fly to Linate than into Malpensa. Another anonymous spectator, which is the best place for ease to get into the city? Public transport, which is usually the least expensive to use. To use our transportation system, there is one ticket that covers it all. So it's not a question of which type of transportation, it's a question of how long you're going to be using it for, how many days. The single ride ticket, it's a little bit complicated in the sense that when you stamp the ticket, it will last for 90 minutes, an hour and a half, but only for one trip on the subway. So you can get on and off as many streetcars or buses as you want, but you can use the subway only once with one ticket for some reason. So that's it. And it's $1.50, or actually $1.80. They just upped it a year ago. So $1.80. And then you have, of course, the carnet, like the 10 ticket in one that costs less than what it costs you to buy 10 actual tickets. But it's pretty cheap. Lori Kaufman, how did Milan become a haute couture fashion center, and is the gallery a venue for Fashion Week? Yeah, I didn't tap into fashion because we could have been here for another couple hours otherwise. So Milan became a haute couture fashion center because a lot of the great first Italian designers, such as Armani, Valentino, Gucci was from Florence, but Armani, Valentino, Fendi, Prada, they came from Milan. They were from Milan. And also Milan has always been a city that had a lot of industries. So also the manufacturers were here, and they don't use the gallery properly during the fashion week. In Milan, we hold 2 fashion weeks, of course, one for the spring summer collection, one for the fall winter collection. We've just finished 2 weeks ago the one for the spring summer collection of next year. And of course, there are events all throughout the city during the fashion week. Inside the gallery, they might have some art installations, or the shops, the actual boutiques might be set up in a way to celebrate, the weekend and hold events within the shops, but not in the public space of the gallery itself. Dorothy Hutchinson, do people live in the vertical forest buildings? Absolutely, they're all apartment buildings. All the 2 towers, both towers are all just residential buildings. Carol Gartland, How did the turnaround for Milan happen regarding the green movement? Was it a person or a group or the community? It is a very interesting question, Carol. And I want to say there wasn't a specific person, there wasn't a specific group. It was the community itself. I think it was a series of events that led one to the next in a chain that created a virtuous circle, a virtuous cycle. So we've had, we are now on the third administration from a political party that it's the left for us in Italy that has been doing really great in Milan. Also, the citizenship is very much involved in Milan. It's very active, and we Milanese were very no fuss people. Like you work, you earn, your standing, you earn your money, you earn what you want with your hard work. And we look at the Southerners in Italy as a little too laid back. We're a little more neurotic than them and always, on a fast paced and moving. So also investing, even emotionally into our city and seeing it bettered and growing and becoming more technological and able to compete and be regarded at the same level as the other European grand cities or capitals in the world, it is a reason of pride for the Milanese, not so much in other Italian cities. If you come to Rome, it's the opposite. So I'm thinking the green movement, as you called it very appropriately, is a grassroots type of thing that was never labeled. But from the bottom, it pushed and it arrived to the elite, and they decided to listen and to invest in that aspect. Kathy Creason, wow, those vertical towers are a great way to get green in our cities. I am a master gardener and will look further into this. Thanks, Kathy, my pleasure. Moto Supra, what is the oldest place in Italy? Meaning building, city? That is a very loaded question. We don't have one city that is the oldest in Italy. Several settlements that happened more or less at the same time in prehistory all throughout the peninsula. We have lots of very old historical cities, Florence, Rome, Venice, lots of towns and smaller hamlets and villages, especially in the middle section of the peninsula in Tuscany, in Umbria, that are still looking like they were in the Middle Ages. So that's what I would look for. Kathy Creason again. Do the vertical towers collect rainwater on the roof to water the plants automatically? I think yes, Kathy. I don't really know the details, but I think yes. Where you saw that crane, if you remember the images on top of the towers, so that is used for the gardeners, of course. There are solar panels on the roofs, so they can heat up their water and their apartments without consuming any electricity. And they do have a system of collecting the rainwater. I don't know if it's the one used to water the plants for irrigation or for other purposes though. Yvonne Bradine, is Milan an expensive city? Unfortunately, yes, it has become a very expensive city, even though being a small city and having a very efficient public transportation system to commute, so to live outside of the city or just at the border of the city and work downtown is very much an easy thing to do. So you can definitely afford living in Milan. Theresa Kirk, Elena, I have watched every one of your tours and have enjoyed each and every one. Thank you, Theresa. Your knowledge and love of Italy has been clearly displayed in every tour. Italy has been my dream vacation, and I pray after COVID I can come and tour your beautiful country. Please tell me, where is your favorite place to visit in Italy? Theresa, thank you so much for your lovely compliments. My favorite, I'm very much biased towards Sicily, I must say. The island of Sicily down south is definitely a treasure trove of all things Italian. You have the cuisine is fantastic, the people are lovely, the scenery, the sea, the architecture, the history, the archaeology. I mean, you have it all in one very, very rich region. Anis Ferrer, this was a mistake for sure. Can you send email out with links or how to watch the documentary and info about the tree towers? I will for sure. Denisha Lyons, can you do private cooking classes on Airbnb experiences? That would be amazing. Denisha, that would be amazing. And I thought about it actually. But, you know, other than this last 2 years that I've been, of course, totally on hold. But right before COVID, I was working so much with my job in tourism that I really didn't have any more time to cook, professionally speaking. I kept it going for a couple of years when I started in tourism, but then I just didn't have the time. So I would love to, but if you come to Italy, you just let me know and I will invite you to dinner over to my place. Mary Labanks, 2 questions actually from Mary. How to visit Lake Como? Very easy. If you come from Milan, it's very easy. You've got trains that connect the city of Como or other cities along the lake shore to Milan and vice versa. Otherwise, you can drive it. It's a beautiful drive, very short, so very, very well connected. And the second question from Marie is Milan considered a financial capital also? Thank you. Yes, Marie, you're correct. Milan is now the seat of our stock exchange. All of our stock exchanges have been concentrated into the Milan one. So we are the stock exchange for Italy. So it is the financial capital. Yeah. Belinda Wells, I have already asked what other foods are famous in Milan. No, you haven't, Belinda. Very, very typical in Milan, other than risotto and ossobuco, polenta. Polenta is something that's typical for the whole region. Of course, it is a dish that has very humble peasant origins when corn flour was the only thing they had available, but it does accompany many Milanese dishes, especially because of how creamy it is. Now chefs put it everywhere. We have the cotoletta. Cotoletta is a breaded, deep fried veal cutlet on the bone. Fantastic. You need to know, if you remember that river that I showed you at the very beginning on the map, the Po River, yeah, that created the plain where Milan is, that marks kind of a line in Italy's cuisine. North of that river, we use butter. South of that river, olive oil reigns on all their dishes. So we use butter. Once upon a time, and I remember my grandma doing it, we used swine fat to deep fry things. We don't do that anymore because we love our coronaries, but we do use a lot of butter. So a lot of the dishes in the Milanese cuisine, in the Milanese tradition, are made with butter, and the deep fried breadcrumbed deep fried veal cutlet is should be originally fried in butter. We have a couple of traditional sweets. One for all, panettone. Panettone is a sweet dough mixed with candied fruits, raisins, of course, sugar and eggs, and it rises a lot and it becomes a very towering kind of sponge cake that we eat at Christmas time. So those, I would say, we have a vegetable soup that is very typical, but it has nothing remarkable about it. So that's basically that is it. There are a couple of more, of course, dishes, but it would be long to explain them. Lisa Flores Wayne, how do we avail of Elena's services on a I love the way you've phrased this, Lisa. How do we avail of Elena's services on a private tour of Milan or other places in Italy? Sometimes I travel with family, 20, 30 people. Wow, usually as many as 42 once. Liza, wow. You can send me an email. You can contact me directly. I don't have a website, and I wanted to point this out because many people actually ask me if I have a website. I don't, for a very simple reason. I customize every experience, depending on what I get asked of, on my availability, on the places where the people want to go and how many of you there are. So I try to make the experiences as tailor-made and customized on your wishes as possible. So I don't have, a ready-made list of services. But if you contact me via email, we can chat on Skype or we can email. And once you let me know what you would like to do, we can work on that. Joanne Fitter. How is the safety of the structure of the buildings supporting the forests in the air ensured? So for resisting to high winds, the plants are wired to the building. So they used wire to secure the plants and the trees to the building. Of course, they are also rooted in soil. So they also have that keeping them stable. And then the gardeners, they climb the towers and they work on ropes coming down from the top and jumping from balcony to balcony. I get the chills just describing this because I have a fear of height, so I could never do it, but they are fantastic. They look like dancers in the air, and they do it more than once a year. So they keep the situation under control by checking very frequently. Lori Kaufman again, what is the theory of the Milan train? What is the history of the Milan train station? The Milan train station, which is another grand monumental building downtown in Milan, was built under fascist rule. So when Mussolini was our dictator or prime minister, the train station is a building that is built in the style that was dominant in the 1920s. So the very end of Art Nouveau and the beginning of the rationalist architecture. Russell Riggs. I didn't see any gargoyles or know if there were any labyrinths in any of the churches? Question mark. Russell, you would have to be a little more specific as to the churches of which town, of which city. Gargoyles are very much present in churches all the way to the end of the Middle Ages. So it is a feature that was invented in the Gothic style, with the Gothic style, when they thought that the outside of the church had to look devilish and hellish, to symbolize that if you live outside of the church and its teachings, you will go to hell. And then inside the churches, you have all the imagery, of the angels and the cherubs and the choirs and the heaven and Jesus and the saints and all that. This stopped, or actually changed, with the changing of the styles. So after the Gothic, we have the Renaissance styles that changed, of course, the rules completely. Deb Casdres. We drove through a region of Italy with a lot of large orchards. Is this the region around Milan? Deb, there's plenty places in Italy where we have orchards. I wouldn't say orchards around Milan, no. There are fields, but they are huge farms and not orchards. So you were probably in a more centrally located region, Marche on the east coast, Tuscany on the opposite coast, Umbria right in the middle, one of those probably. Judy Fried, when we honeymooned in Italy, we took a boat tour on Lake Como and then visited Milan. Judy, I hope you loved it. It sounds lovely. Patty Radotic, is there an opportunity to interact with locals in a game of chess or cards? Patty, yes, and I love to do that myself. So there are a couple of cafes and venues where they keep a chessboard on hand so that the customers can use it. You would have to look this up online, and you might find news on forums or on travel blogs about these places where they state that they do have in fact cards of it. Cards, you will find them everywhere, in every cafe, especially the neighborhood cafe where the local group of elderly men will spend their mornings drinking a little bit of white wine and playing cards. So I remember joining them while I was in uni, skipping my very early morning lessons. spettatore anonimo. Oh, sorry, an anonymous spectator. I switched to Italian for some reason. I was detained and missed your tour. Will it be recorded for viewing later? Yes. Mara records every one of the virtual tours, and you can access them either on her website, girltraveltours.com, or on her Facebook page, Girl Travel Tours, or on her YouTube channel, Girl Travel Tours. Mara, was this precise? I've heard it so many times. From tomorrow, probably, yeah, because there is a little bit of work that Mara does behind the scenes. Marianne Meager, I hope. My niece who lived in Milan said that the courtyards are amazing, but what you showed us is wonderful. Is most in courtyards. So the courtyards that your niece was referring to are very typical of a certain type of architectures in Milan, especially from the 1700s and 1800s. I didn't show you much from that age. We have a big mixture, there's things from the Middle Ages, things from the Renaissance times, things from the Baroque times. I mean, it's all together in the city. So they are residential buildings, and during the day they all have a custodian. Okay, so someone who lives in the building and is at the entrance of the building the whole day. So during the working hours of the custodian, the door of the building on the street, on the sidewalk, will be open. And so when you walk down the curb on the sidewalk in Milan, especially downtown, you can peek inside the doors of the buildings, and you will see that inside they open up in a beautiful courtyard that has statues or columns or greenery or a combination of all three. Sometimes I step inside. I don't care. I step inside, and if the custodian asks if I'm there to see someone in the building or why am I there, I just say that I wanted to take a peek at the courtyard inside, and they are happy to show you around. It's not a problem. So yeah, a lot of courtyards in Milan, but I didn't show you any. Jeanette Frank, are tours of the top fashion houses available as part of a visit to Milan? Yes and no. Some are open to the public. There are especially a couple of foundations that were started by fashion houses. Prada, that I showed you, has a Prada foundation in Milan that has a permanent exhibition and also rotating temporary exhibitions. There is Armani, who opened up what he called the Armani Silo, that is a whole tower where his costumes and gowns and designs from the different decades are on display. So yes, it is something that you can do in Milan. If you are with an experienced and good local guide, she or he might have contacts to ateliers, so maybe not top fashion houses, but local artisans, seamstresses who are, still doing it artisanally, and that's lovely to visit. Laura Eastwood, not a question, just a comment. I love the idea of rebuilding the Colosseum in plant life, right, Laura? I love that too. Like it very much. An anonymous spectator, I'm interested in your Portugal, Spain, and Morocco tour in 2023 for me and my daughter. Please send info, address, da, 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 da.
I'll take care of that one.
Yeah. Jennifer F. Hi, Jennifer. We would love to know your favorite place to show kids in Milan. Thank you. There is actually a place that I debated for a while whether to include it or not, and then I didn't. But I know the exact place. Well, first of all, the parks, all the parks in Milan, especially the newest ones, as the one that I showed you from above, where the vertical forest towers are very much equipped for children. So they have different environments, they have playgrounds, but also they organize for free. They organize different labs where the kids can take part in to learn about the different plants or the different insects and nature and, all of that. But a specific place is the museum for kids. I will maybe send Mara the link to their website because otherwise to just tell you the address now would not make a lot of sense. Jerry Penn, is there a Jewish community in Milan? Jerry, yes, of course there is a Jewish community in Milan. We have a synagogue that you can visit. I remember it being one of the visits that I did when I was in school, when I was a little kid in school. So yes, there is a Jewish community in Milan. But in Italy, we have some examples in other places such as Venice, such as Rome, such as Florence, where the Jewish communities are some of the oldest continuous in history Jewish communities in the world. So the Milan one is not as old as other Jewish communities in Italy. Derek Thill, what are winter temperatures like? It's likely warmer than Winnipeg, so it may be worthwhile to look at the 2026 Olympics there. Right, Derek, we got the we will host the Winter Olympics in 2026. It is kind of a new news. Definitely less cold than Winnipeg. Oh my God, absolutely. It does get a little bit cold. You saw how close to the Alps we are, and we are not on the seashore, so we don't have that mitigating effect that the sea lends. But because of climate change and because of the temperatures rising everywhere, it is way less cold than when I was a kid. Milan, for instance, was very famous throughout Italy for its fog. It's very thick, dense fog. My father remembers it from when he was in his 20s, but nowadays you don't have that anymore. So it's not too much of a rigid winter. It does snow. We have but just a couple days of snow a year, so not much. Gladys Van Orden. What is a popular aperitif in Milano? Gladys, pen and paper, Negroni, 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 Negroni. So Negroni was invented in Milan. There is also a wrong Negroni. This is actually the name, the wrong Negroni, which was done by mistake by a barman here in Milan who mixed into a Negroni. He was making a Negroni, but he mixed Prosecco instead of gin, and he made a new drink that everybody loved. And so they just have it on the menu nowadays. So these two are very, very typical. I always talk about the spritz when I do these virtual tours. And I always, suggest it when I'm in person with someone and visiting Italy, because it's very much in fashion now all throughout Italy. But spritz comes from the region where Venice is. So originally from Milan, we like our drinks stronger than the Venetian, apparently. So Negroni or the wrong Negroni. Aurora Davy, how many days of tour would you recommend to dedicate to Milan to see and get to know the city well? Let's say at least 3. If you can spend a week, fantastic, even better. Natalia Taskaya. Hi, Elena. Hi, Natalia. We were using segways in Prague. Is there anything like that in Milano? Thank you. Natalia, so there are several Segway companies in Italy, in different cities. I don't know specifically about Milan, but I am sure that the answer is yes. So you just need look online and you will definitely find something as for Segways in Milan. Can I make a name, Mara, of a company? Yeah, so there is a Segway company that I'm sure has also a Milan base, a Milan office. So maybe they do also tours in Milan. That is called Fat Tires. Fat Tires. So if you want to look that up. Barb Harrington, is there anything to see or do in the other 8 areas of the city other than the center? Barb, absolutely. There's a wealth of things to see in the other 8 areas. Too little time tonight, but yes, if you do plan on traveling to Milan, and this of course would be my suggestion for any place in the world, you want to read a little bit about it before, maybe watch a couple of videos. Now there's footage about everything on YouTube, even short ones. You want to look up a couple of travel blogs, excuse me, to make sure you don't miss out on anything. I need to drink, sorry. This is not a Negroni, unfortunately. It's just Coke. Marie Labanks. Is there any historical fort? The one that I showed you. I think, yeah, the one that I showed you is the only one that we have in Milan. GV. Are you single? Signed, Sonny Ventresca. Sonny, I am single, yes. Nancy Eli, how would you compare the cuisine of Milan with that of Southern Italy? So this is an interesting question, Nancy, because the cuisine, the traditional dishes of the Milanese cuisine actually reflect the nature of Milan society throughout the centuries. Milan has always been very happy to leave politics and power and the matters of the church to Rome and to other places in Italy, to make room for its bourgeoisie and make sure that they could, work and get rich and live comfortable lives with nothing else and no one else interfering. So Milan has a tradition of being a city of commerce, a city of working class, of rich, a very rich working class. And this is reflected in its cuisine, because if you think about it, saffron, sometimes it's costlier than gold. The veal cutlet, veal is a very precious, let's call it, meat, a very expensive meat. It comes from the calf, no? So don't feel bad about the calf, it's okay. But it's going to be the most expensive single piece of food that you find on the restaurant menus. So all of these reflect definitely the nature that Milan has always embodied. An anonymous spectator, do people speak English in town? Yes. Nowadays, it's easy to find. Milan is very much, it's a city that has always been looking forward and has always been open, Milan, for where Milan is placed. We are Italian, so we have our feet in the Mediterranean, but our head, it's up in the Alps and into Northern Europe. So Milan, I would say nowadays, Milan, it's the only actually European and international city that we have in Italy. So not that that is good or bad. I'm not giving it any value. I'm just stating the fact that Milan, for its infrastructure, for its mentality, for how open-minded Milanese are, for how international its citizenship is, and for many other reasons, for the projects that the administration has for the future of the city and what it's investing in. For all these reasons, Milan is definitely the most international European city that we have in Italy. Marie Everett, what is Ossobuco? Ossobuco is a veal cutlet, so it's a cut of meat coming from the calf. That is braised together with wine. It's cooked in wine with, of course, butter and some veggies that then melt in the wine. They make a very thick sauce, and it is served typically in Milan. It is served with some chopped up parsley, lemon zest, garlic on top of it. So you see it's sprinkling green because of the parsley that is and accompanied with saffron risotto. Jackie Van Leuven, what are the accommodation options and costs? Safer areas to stay? So Milan is a very safe city, I would say. Of course, the closest you are to the downtown, the more expensive it's going to be. But as any other place in the world, in the Western world at least, it's full of Airbnbs. So if you look up either on Airbnb or on booking.com or hotel websites, you will find plenty types of accommodation for a range of prices. An anonymous spectator, is the Milan Square the biggest shopping area of Europe? No. The biggest shopping area in Europe is in Prague, if it hasn't changed recently. There's a huge... Oh, I know what you're referring to. You're actually right, but it's not in the city. This is a department store, a huge mall that they opened up recently in the last few years outside of Milan in Arese. So yeah, I don't remember what it's called. Like it's called maybe the mall or something like that. And it's the biggest one in Europe. You're right. Belinda Wells, do the trees on the buildings change color in autumn? Yes. And if you look it up, Belinda, you will find online pictures of the vertical forest covered in ice and snow when it snowed a few years back. It's beautiful. It's all white.
I think this is a
Marilla
great,
Banks.
yeah, I think this is a great last question, right? Because you can not only speak a little Italian for us, but you can say farewell at the same time.
Can you speak some Italian for us? Marie asks. Certamente, Marie, posso parlare un po' di italiano per voi? Grazie della vostra attenzione, è stato un piacere. Grazie, Mara.
You are very welcome. And thank you, Elena. You are a fan favorite. You have lots and lots and lots of comments all saying, come back, do another one, do another one. So we will talk about what we can do for the future and for the new year with another virtual tour for Elena. I want to thank the audience and thank every one of you for being here. Obviously, without you, these would not happen. We totally appreciate this, and the guides completely appreciate it. And I know Elena had a wonderful time and appreciates the audience as well. So for all of you, I can't say I'll see you next week because I am going off to Kenya on a safari, but tune in to our Facebook and keep us up on your screen here and there. We will stream live from our tour in the next month. So I hope to see you soon. I will see you at the end of October. Take care. Have a good day.